Bring the meeting to order. This is the, I said this before, this is the last session,
You just jinxed yourself.
this is the last session, I hope, in the information gathering phase of the budget process. And hopefully we can, from here, start what I call the budget adjustment phase before we get to the final discussion and vote. And just like to, just simply, that budget adjustment phase and the discussion around it and the implications of adjusting the budget, I think we just need to give ourselves as much time in the month as possible, because I think that it's gonna lead to some interesting, difficult, enlightening kind of conversations that we're all gonna have to have. So we have until 11 today. We have to go through the capital budget. I gather one of the things that is still confusing in many people's minds is the transportation issue, which I think we probably should spend some time on as well. I prioritize that discussion as well. And then I think we have a couple of other tabs like district-wide. But I would, maybe we can go through the remaining tabs and probably, if there's areas that we can really kind of, where you think we have less questions, let's just move on to where I think the most significant questions will be this morning on the remaining items.
We did receive, I don't know whether you guys received a very lengthy email from a member of the community about transportation. I don't know whether you saw that, Tony?
I don't think that they CC'd it.
I'll have to forward it. I
And
will
I
forward
think
it.
it should be forwarded because I think it's a really thorough, and I don't know how accurate, but thorough email about transportation. Thank you so much.
I'll forward it.
And then we should obviously talk about how to respond.
Yeah, no, I think let's just talk about the transportation issue. We can
Yep.
deal with that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll
Yep.
just have,
Yep.
it's a very lengthy, sometimes rambling, but
Yep, that's true.
I think any of those emails that come in regarding budgeting and questions, forward those to Bill, me, and
Yeah.
we can have the administration respond.
Yeah.
So that we don't get.
Great.
Okay, so,
Should we start with do you want to start with transportation?
yeah, let's do that.
You guys are just diving right into it, aren't you?
Good morning, Phil.
How are we doing?
Just really for you, just the head count on transportation, there's 0 heads? I mean, there's 0 allocated.
There's currently, correct, I think the decision was made last year to eliminate those positions. So the district no longer has any district-wide transportation individuals. Everything that we do for transportation is currently outsourced.
Right.
And there was a decision that was made last year, I believe. Last year coming into FY20.
Right. So, Craig, any issues involving transportation that come up to you right now? Do you, if you have to follow up, you have to then talk, you're not really talking to internal people, you are really talking to people that are not in our.
Well, so it's sort of an in-between, so I talk to the first student, bus drivers, management, and that group.
Right.
And then I also am the liaison for the school principals, particularly in the lower grades.
Right.
So that they don't have to do that direct contact right now.
Okay.
So in terms of transportation, I think where we're really, outside of our contractual increase with for a student, I think where we're truly seeing that increase is with our out-of-district transportation. If I recall last year when we did do the budget for transportation, so I think a question came up is that it was projected that we would save some money for transportation, which we did for the most part, and that savings primarily had to do with savings from the director and from the other drivers that we had. So of course, by not having the director and the drivers, you would save that money. Where we fell short is in our estimate for what it would cost us for out-of-district transportation. And also what we could not predict at that time was a number of students that we would have who would require out-of-district transportation. If you look on the FY20 budget, I think we outlined, and I think it was just a general outline of those routes. I think there were six routes that were given, not necessarily the number of students who would require transportation. The FY21 budget is driven purely by a review, Mike, you can chime in, is completely driven by a review of our current students who are out of district transportation. In addition to that, anything that we can anticipate based on what we see as a trend. So it's really driven, FY21 is driven strictly purely by FY20 and a review on a projection for where we think it would be for next year.
Can you just go over this? I mean, contractually, this is such a tremendous increase. Are you obligated to this, or are there other alternatives?
So once again, it's two parts. So you have to look at it in two parts. Our first student contractual increases, I do believe, is at 6.675. As you may recall, our fleet, we have a very old fleet of buses. The contract calls for a renewal of our entire fleet. We're scheduled to have 11 buses delivered for FY20. We have 9 or so to be delivered late January into February, and the remaining 2 for our 2 small buses are mid buses for special education, in-district special education, transportation.
And a further clarifying point, the delivery of those buses was delayed by the union, the auto union strike.
That is correct. So I think their initial projection was those buses should have been here in October, right? But again, because of the strike and stuff like that, we're not gonna get them until later or much later. So they're currently in the state. They're just pretty much being prepped to be, so we can have them on the road. So again, so it's two parts to it. It's a first student component, which is in district, and then you have the out of district transportation, where you're seeing that large increase primarily has to do with out of district transportation.
Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah.
All right, so we're currently transporting with the in-district. So the in-district, we currently have 22 routes that we do in district. For, as I mentioned, first student has, it calls for a 6.75 increase in year 2 of the contract.
When you say we're responsible, but we're still outsourcing that need, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, sorry, go ahead.
And is that a year-to-year contract with first?
With first student, we have a 5-year contract with first student.
Okay.
So, that's included in the 11.87% of regular transportation increase?
That is correct.
And
Also included in
Yeah.
that line, just to clarify, is $30,000 that we have set aside for a software upgrade to our camera system. Craig, can you help me with the camera system, please?
So currently the cameras on the buses are not connected to our infrastructure in any way. So in order to be in compliance with Board of Ed policy, when the cameras need to be reviewed, the assistant principals will send a note to me asking for video of the cameras. When the buses return to the bus garage, I have to go down to the bus garage to remove the hard drive physically from the bus. You then have the window of time between the morning runs and the afternoon runs to go through the video. The video has to be reviewed in real time. So with say the bus run is about 45 minutes or so, you then have normally a request that will come in for multiple runs. You have to watch the run in real time and then extract the video from it. Then that video gets saved and you return the drive. What we're trying to do is avoid that time, because that's a large amount of time being used to obtain bus video, and move to a wireless system so that when the buses return to the bus garage, they will connect to a localized Wi-Fi network that would allow assistant principals to actually access the video from their desks in their schools, or at the very least from a central location in the bus garage. And it would prevent the actual physical removal of the hard drives, and it would increase the efficiency of time when trying to access this.
How many requests on a weekly basis do you get to review video on buses?
So if I break it down, they come in swarms. So there could be a week that will go by that will be none, and then there can be a week that will go by and we'll have 5 or 6. So overall, you're probably dealing with like 1 or 2 if I was to break it down, you know, add them all together and divide. But you're not dealing with, it's all incident based and it's also seasonal based. The fall is much more intense, and the spring is what we've learned so far. Middle of the winter, not quite so much. But then there's also, beyond requests, there's also driver interactions, parent complaints, accidents, misunderstandings, all those other things that occur that prompt us getting the video. So there's the disciplinary requests that come directly from the schools, but there's also just the nature of operating buses that prompts this too. And first student is not allowed direct access to the video, so all of those requests come through me right now.
Go ahead.
Apart from the 30,000, there's probably another,
So on pages,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, pages 144 through 145, we provide additional detail as to the
Okay.
makeup of all of what was included in our overall transportation costs.
so here it is. Yep, here it is.
Could I read a question?
Yeah, the daily rate of 408, I mean, are there any options on that with regard to the special ed transportation? I mean, what happened to the old vehicles? Like, do we have any alternatives?
Well, I think, sorry, before you ask that question, can
Yeah.
I just understand what did this world look like in 18 and 19? And probably Phil, I don't know if you're gonna have that knowledge.
Unfortunately, I do not.
So what did
correct.
that process look like? Because then in the past 2 years, it's when we've had the serious jump. So I'm just trying to understand how we operated.
Before
Yeah,
last May, or last.
correct, like how we operated in fiscal 18 and fiscal 19.
So we ran an internal bus fleet
Okay,
that took care of, we had 2 mid-sized buses that were also wheelchair buses. They would be, depending on what the document looks like, referred to as buses 31 and 32.
okay,
Which
which we still own.
we still own, but are being replaced by first student no later than February 14th, we hope. Then we had a series of what we call vans, but they were more like SUVs. And those handled our, the vast majority of our special needs bus runs.
Okay,
And they were maintained by employees of the district.
okay,
And they were then supervised by Dave, the Director of Transportation.
okay.
So that was really the plan, or that was the process up until this year, which with the elimination of that fleet, moved the majority of the special ed runs to a company called Relia. The mid-sized buses, 31 and 32, to first student. And then we are where we are.
So I guess if we were achieving our goals, which is transportation, in 18 and 19 for under $100,000, have we done a cost analysis? And now we're at $800,000. Have we done the cost analysis to go back?
I would wanna clarify, you need to include the 18 and 19 amount under non-certified staff, almost $36,000, which would have been salaries for all the drivers.
Not an all-in number, right?
Right.
I mean, but at least that
But
number.
Dave's you've got
Yeah, that's
another.
also the drivers of the Fed fleet would be in that
Right, so
number.
we,
How
So you
much
have-
of that? Because it's not all of them.
No, everything
How-
that's included there is everyone that we had in transportation. So it included Dave and also the drivers. So everything in that non-certified line in 1819, that 335, did include pretty much all the drivers, including Dave.
right, so we moved that down.
So it's still.
Director would have been probably a 30%, right, of that number. So let's just say the balance.
Well, I guess the
70%.
question is, yeah, you're not transferring all that 335, because we
Yeah.
did this for efficiencies.
But just to clarify, you cannot, it's very difficult to operate a fleet of vehicles without a director. So you cannot exclude the
Yeah.
director from the entire, you do need to include the
It-
director.
Yeah, it doesn't, let's just go with that.
Yeah,
It's-
right.
Let's just go with that. Like,
Okay.
move everything down.
Yeah.
And let's just go
Okay.
with that.
And then, but still, I guess to your point, you know, we understand the jump from 2018-19 to 19-20 because we moved that line down. We get that. And then the question is the 800, which we're now talking about. So
So-
that's the big jump that's really hard to get your brain around. And what I've heard is a 6.7% contract increase
Correct.
and a $30,000 camera allocation. And what else I missed?
So pretty much the difference between we're transporting, the need to transport more students
In
out of district.
out of district.
How many more?
Yeah.
I think I think we're currently transporting 12 students, and I think the initial estimate based on what I saw in terms of routes and everything was 6. So we're pretty much double where our initial projection.
So
and
12 in all or 18 in all?
12.
12.
And
Now-
in addition to that as well, is also the expansion. And again, in terms of, I truly cannot speak to what happened prior, but I can only tell you what I'm seeing. Also included in this is an expansion of our extended school year service, or ESY services, both for in-district and out of district.
What's
Basically
that?
summer school.
Okay.
Which is,
Plus.
Phil, I just want to
plus-
clarify, I think we have 13 rides, it's actually more students.
so 13 rides and more students. Thank you for
Because we
clarifying.
do shares wherever we can.
Correct.
Okay.
Which reduce some of the costs.
Yeah.
And so again, it's all of these unanticipated needs that came up during the course of the year, which is really driving all of this. So it's difficult to compare to a year where we were not transporting out of district to a year where we are transporting out of district, because they're not a true apples to apples comparison. Where the true comparison really is compared FY 20 to FY 21, because those are the 2 years where we do have that out of district transportation.
I'm just saying, do we have any alternatives? Like, are there, I mean, that's all I'd like to see is this it? I mean, what if,
So
I
I can just talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that. You know, we do primarily use Relia, but we've also, I have been, Andrew, Phil's assistant has been, we call around, we ask people, I mean, we spend time on the phone soliciting information from various companies to get the best rate we can. We coordinate with other districts wherever we can. You know, we to share, in situations where students are not attending, we're going back to Relia saying, listen, can you cut us a break here? You're not making 2 runs a day, you're charging, you know, we work that out. So, you know, in the absence of a director, there's been a significant amount of time by multiple people to get the best rates possible and at the same time ensure that we're transporting these students.
So is this number, 2021 number of 817, how would you imagine if you're looking forward to 21, 22, for example, that number to change? And I know, I'm not asking us to do a long-term projection, I'm just saying, is this the new normal? So what would come out of here? This is a bubble.
Well, I mean, just with anything with special education, it's very difficult to predict where things are gonna be, because everything's really driven by the IEPs for these students. So it's difficult to say in 22, 23 where it would be, because we do not know. If things continue the way it is, we will hope to see a leveling off in terms of our cost. Because again, our cost in terms of for an annual increase would increase about maybe 3 to 5%
On a contract.
on a contract basis.
So we're looking at now our transportation, because of the changes we've made in the influx of district transportation needs this year, of us looking at around 800,000 every year? That is the new normal?
I would want to say yes. I mean, once again, we'll definitely double check these numbers, and again, this is information that we know as of now, and SPED is a continually evolving animal and things will change. So as things change between now and let's say May, we'll make these adjustments. But in terms of, is this the new norm? In this range, yes, I would definitely say we can expect that we're not gonna go back to the levels where we were back in 17, 18, 18, 19 in terms of transportation.
If we, are there, I think that there was some assessments and some calculations that were done to make that decision from going in-house to outsourcing, right? Is that, do these numbers then, make you rethink that
Right.
or not? I mean,
that is a part of an overall discussion
Yeah.
that, well, we all could have, and we have to look at everything collectively and not just on
Right,
an individual
of course.
basis to see what it
Yeah.
is.
Which which is good, it's sometimes, it's a good thing to rethink what happened and go back to a system that was clearly more efficient.
In finance, we touched on this, and we've asked to kind of go back and delve into some of the adjustments
Sure.
made to the 19-20 budget. In May of last year, as we were finalizing the 19-20 budget, we were presented with a reduction to the transportation budget of almost $190,000. Post when we voted on it in January as part of the reconciliation and trying to make adjustments as needed. And that also stipulated selling a certain number of our vehicles. The finance committee has asked for Phil to go back and pull that detail so we can reanalyze where we are.
Yeah.
To see which
right,
path,
because just for.
facts change,
Yes.
so.
Just to
figure out what
clarify for everyone's benefit, that 462,930 is not what we're spending this year. We're actually
That is
spending
correct.
about 270 more than that.
Right.
Okay? That's the expected.
That's
between, that's the expected. So the real spend this year is gonna be around 730, not 462.
That's an
Remember?
important number to.
Right.
Right.
So think if we're absorbing 270, well, not yet, but
We're hoping.
we're hoping to absorb 270 increase this year.
And
That
that
brings
four,
that number to seven, whatever.
and that
over
463 number wasn't what we originally voted on, that was decreased by 190,000.
Right.
In May.
So I can also, just to shed some further light on that,
Yeah.
Tony,
Yeah.
if I look at the truly unanticipated, meaning it could not have been predicted, it's in the range of 200 to 224,000 in
Wow.
transportation. So if you put that with your number, you're really not that far off from,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Can I ask some more questions on alternatives? I mean, are you able to say to parents, can you drive your kid and we'll pay you? I mean, what
so,
are, I
so
really.
we do that occasionally, it's not ideal, that's something that's a personal conversation, we're essentially asking the parent to do us a favor, we do reimburse them, but it is, it's not the thing that I like to rely on. Parents could be reimbursed at the IRS rate, it's 4 trips a day to and from, and we've done that, so we had an example this year where we did that, where a student moved in from a town, it was a unique placement, we had to find a ride, it took us a little bit, and in the meantime, we did it quickly, it took us about 4 days, but we were reimbursing that parent, so that is an option. I don't wanna make that the norm, I think it can invite other issues, which I would prefer to avoid, so it's just.
And then what are you doing in terms of like carpooling with other districts?
We call all the time. It's a regular, anytime we have a new ride, the first thing is, let's see if we can get a ride share. It's just standard procedure.
How far is the farthest student we're picking up out of district?
Generally speaking, what the law says is you need to keep it within an hour. That's what the law allows. We have, we push that sometimes, it's 53 minutes without traffic kind of thing, so it's a lot.
Yeah.
And age and stage of the child plays a role in that. You gotta be careful. You can't put an 11-year-old on a bus for 55 minutes. It's just not really something I prefer to do.
So I would say, because I know that we still have SUVs and buses, to your point, you said that they were gonna be hopefully maybe transferred out in February. I would say we not release any vehicles until, because we could have the conversation that it might come back in-house.
Sure.
So that we not release any vehicles until we solidify and truly understand a cost analysis of going back to in-house.
Sure, all the vehicles are still in place and
Are
we have
still in
not
place.
really,
Yeah.
like I said,
Sitting
that's
there
just
rotting.
that ongoing, discussion that we're having.
Okay, and then Mike, I have another question.
Yes, sure.
In your previous experience from another district,
Mhm.
what do they do? How do they handle
Well, I can tell you,
transportation?
in my previous experience, I've never been involved in transportation as much as I am now. That's fine, it's interesting to learn about and it's important. It's the same, it's really the same in
It's
terms of
outsourced.
outsource, looking for ride shares, putting out, looking for best rates whenever you can. You know, you just do all those things, you know, and doing that, you know, and understand, you know, with our current staffing and the people that are doing that, we do that the best we can.
So in your first year here,
Mhm.
it was in-house. Last
That's
year,
correct.
this year, it's outsourced.
Correct.
What are the pros and cons to both?
I don't know, I'd have to really think about that. I mean, if it's a pro that I'm much, you know, Phil and I are much more hands-on with it, and Craig, you know, much more hands-on with it, then I suppose that's a pro. I mean, we're getting very involved in it and taking the time to look at it.
And the
that's-
Or is that a
Is
con,
that-
that you're very involved in
Right,
it?
it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, you know, it's just trying to coordinate, you know, there's multiple moving pieces to the transportation, so, you know, for example,
I guess my question was
Yeah.
it easier when it was in-house?
you know, it's hard to isolate that because there's other factors involved, so I don't know if it was simply that it was the in-house piece of it that had an effect, you know, there's a lot of moving parts with it. I think we're getting to a spot now where we are, you know, we have a good relationship with the Relia. I have direct numbers. We call, we get information. You know, they make adjustments very quickly for us. So I think part of that relationship building has been helpful. You know, Craig has put a tremendous amount of time into all this, and we're looking to shift that off of him now, and which is I think appropriate and helpful. So you know,
Yeah.
Look, I think there's pros and cons to both, and I think it's just a hard analysis to make an isolated, you know,
Okay.
specific
Listen,
variables.
we made honestly, it's sort of like, there's a financial bet here that we made that actually didn't turn out the way we thought it was gonna turn out, right? Because you're reducing the in-house staff, you're hoping by going outsourcing, you're saving money, which created room to spend for other things. That didn't happen, right? I mean,
That
it just didn't happen.
That happens.
Can I ask a question? And I suspect I know the answer to this, but I would feel derelict if I didn't ask it. Is it a state requirement that we pay for summer transportation for kids going to, whether it's summer school?
Yeah,
or-
so the transportation we provide brings them to their programs here.
I'm just wondering, I mean, any other family in the district that's putting their kids in a program is responsible for their own transportation.
Yeah,
We offer the service, it's great, come go to school and
Yeah.
have it. What's the requirement for transporting it?
So I believe I can look into that, but I believe we are required to transport. Now, the other, for extended school year, the major different factor to what you're describing being that we're bringing kids in so they can receive their special education services. So it's different than going to a camp, for example, you know, at a local program or something. So because it's related
And
to
we have
special
a
education
12-month
service.
requirement for
Well,
special
so
education?
it's a good question too. Just a little backgrounds. Annually, every student's planning and placement team needs to decide whether or not they require extended school year services. And there's certain criteria put forth by the state to make those decisions. Teams need to make those decisions. Those decisions are made on April and May, planning for the essentially July program. That is a requirement, and for students who either because of the severity of their disability require that level of service,
Sure.
or because of what the state calls regression, meaning they cannot
Right.
recoup reasonable learning in a reasonable amount of time, those students are required ESY. So when we go through that analysis, that's how those decisions are made, and those are individual decisions.
Sure.
And then when we provide that program, once you say a student is eligible, then you have to provide the program, and that typically
No,
includes
and
transportation.
providing the program, I think, is
Yeah.
is one thing, but I mean, we are a district that doesn't employ the majority of our employees 12 months, so I just
Yeah.
think, when I think about it,
Yeah.
I think, you know, is it a conversation you can have, or can we find out, you know, is this something that we offer, which is fantastic,
Yeah.
and we encourage people to take advantage of it, and we do everything we can to provide those services, but, you know,
You-
transportation is a shared cost, or something like that? I mean, I don't know.
yeah,
It's
I
a
have
state
to really-
requirement or it's not, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, the school year the extended school year services, when required, are mandated.
But the other,
If you're asking specifically about the transportation, I can look into that more.
I don't know.
I think it gets a little, slippery, but we can certainly look into it.
Just what
Yeah.
other districts are doing too, I mean, does everybody pay for that?
I've never heard of any not transporting,
Really?
so, and they all offer it in various and assorted ways, like,
Alright.
yeah.
Well, it just seemed, you know, just worth
Yeah,
running
worth
down.
exploring.
For historical context, the in-source versus outsource applies to both regular transportation and sped transportation?
Only sped,
Only sped.
correct.
No.
So, well, we have our in-district transportation, which are the yellow buses.
No, no, no.
Although there is a fee for the route administration that we now pay for a student that we didn't pay in the past.
Correct, I'm sorry,
This is
what's
not-
actually?
No, so let me rephrase. So in a simple world, there's sped transportation and non-sped transportation.
Correct,
Sped transportation went from internally managed to outsourced.
correct.
Non-sped, over
Non-sped,
historically, over the last 5 years, has it,
Internally managed, but
correct, internally managed, but
done by it.
but the busing provided by first student.
okay, all right.
So we had a director pretty much that sat on top of first student for our in-district transportation.
Okay.
So our in-district included both regular education transportation and also in-district sped transportation.
Okay.
Where we're seeing the real increase is in the out-of-district
No, I
transportation.
know, but I'm,
Okay.
I'm refocusing to the other one as well,
Okay.
whether it's a 5-year contract,
Correct,
and that, and it's, I'll use the word outsourced, but there, I hear, bus improvements, union, so just very simplistically, when I think outsource, I think as a lease relationship, right? But then it seems to be overlaid with, well, but we're doing capital improvements and we have, union implications, so in my mind, I'm trying to separate, what that means to be outsourced for non-sped,
okay,
right? So,
It means we have a contract with First Student who they employ the drivers, we don't, so it is non-union to us.
okay,
And First Student owns the buses, but the way our contract is structured, essentially, we pay them for the use of the bus through the contract.
right,
And the reason we did have a slightly larger than normal bump in the new contract is, as Phil said, we're overhauling basically the entire fleet of buses. We've had a lot of downtime with buses breaking down, having to collapse routes and stuff, so the buses, they have to be replaced, we're replacing them in tranches, and that's factored into this contract as well. We did have an in-house transportation coordinator who managed the routing of the buses, so that he would do all of that internally here in the district and then just give First Student, here are your routes. Without that person in place, the plan was supposed to be that First Student, for a nominal fee, like, I think last year was, or this particular year was like $15,000 or something like that,
going to 18.
they would manage the routing. Now, we did have some hiccups with that at the beginning of the year, which caused some challenges, but that has, with the help of our staff here, have been managing to resolve that.
okay.
So, the equipment, the buses are owned by First Student, the employees are First
First
Student
students.
employees,
Yeah,
and we just contract them.
okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jane.
I might suggest that we pick up further conversation regarding these costs and containment strategies that may be possible
Yeah.
at the finance committee meeting.
We already asked,
Yeah,
we already
yeah,
asked for
yeah,
a
yeah.
deep dive
So
for February.
instead of duplicating that, I think that the information everyone's looking for is what
Yeah,
was
there.
what was
So,
asked for there.
Just to clarify as well, are we now also not, because what we have was more historical comparison, should I also be looking into cost containment if we should revert back?
Well, I think we have to,
I would like to see
I
that
think,
cost
I think the
analysis.
tipping point of basically $410 a day for outsourcing of that service, you know, does it,
Okay.
are we at a point where a different strategy makes sense?
All right, let me do some digging on that, and then hopefully by the next finance committee, FinCo, I'll
I
be
mean, I
able
think we have to
to provide.
answer the question. I think we've reached a point when you're approaching $1 million, we have to reanalyze where we are
Yeah.
to see if we're in the right.
Yeah, is there any economies of scale, or is it all linear, it's just number of rides times
Right.
cost per ride, you know what I mean? Is it, can you scale, is this scale or not?
I'll do an
Like
analysis.
doing, yeah,
And just, if, Mike can probably then shed a little bit of color just from an, not numbers, but just emotional perspective on what it is like handling it in-house versus, I'd like to understand that too.
Yeah, and look, there's a lot, I want to be clear, there's a lot of people doing that. I mean, Craig has done
Yeah,
tremendous work with that, far more than me, frankly.
yeah, so
You know,
all of,
I'm
all
looking
of,
at really just the,
yeah.
you know, the out-of-district stuff and with Phil's office and,
Right.
you know,
Right.
I suggest maybe we, you know, there's still, I think, some questions about flexibility around the number related to, you know, the whole benefits number. So if we,
Original, okay.
maybe we move to district-wide,
Right.
yeah. I'm just trying to hit the big,
Yeah, before
the big ones, yeah, the big ones.
And I do apologize, everyone, I have to leave at 10:45, I have a child with a doctor's appointment.
Yes, capital, we're gonna do right
Yeah.
after this one, okay?
The little guy goes to the orthodontist during his lunch period.
Or Mike, if you're stretched for time, cause there's a lot of stuff going on.
I'm okay today.
We can move to capital first. You good? Okay.
He's enjoying this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's good learning, right? Like,
It is.
yeah.
All right, so, you guys wanna jump into, I guess the discussion really revolves around, health insurance, or
Yeah.
just insurance, right? So, as I've mentioned before, we're coming into FY '20, when the state issued their rate increase in last April, the district saw an 8% increase in our premium increase. For FY '21, we are assuming that the state based in trends, that the state will also have an 8% increase in addition to that regionalized rate adjustment that we spoke about before,
Right.
which will get us to roughly 10% for FY '21. And if everything continues the same, we're projecting to FY '22 a 12% increase. Because the regionalized rate adjustment the initial estimate is 4% phased in over 2 years. So that's where we are in terms of the increase for premium based. Now, the discussion, I guess, Tony wants to get into what options do we have? If we go back to the self-insured model, we have to get comfortable to the point where we will see those fluctuations. And if I'm correct, maybe the main reason why we went to the state partnership plan was because we saw those fluctuations in terms of claims and the unpredictability nature relating to this health insurance in general. So can we go back to it? The board can make a decision to go back to a self-insured plan, keeping in mind that we may have those ebbs and flows overall.
Can you just flesh out
What's the penalty of going back?
By the state moving, or with this regionalized rate adjustment, we no longer have that penalty. We just need to notify the state within 3
Okay,
months.
there's no penalty
Right,
anymore.
you're not
We just
locked
need to
in
know,
with
we're not
the-
locked in anymore because of this, because
Yeah.
it's a change in the policy or in the plan, so to speak.
Okay.
But we were in our third year anyway, so we were
Correct, so
outside
they
of
wouldn't-
the penalty
correct.
phase for coming
Right,
out anyway.
so the only thing we just need to, I think, if I'm correct, give 3 months notice that we would be exiting from the plan.
So can you just tell me about self-insured and how that works?
So self-insured has, I want to say, we have the claim. So if you're self-insured, you would put aside a bucket of money. Let's say we put aside, in our instance, we put aside $1 million. That would be in our internal services fund.
Which we have.
Correct, but that's not the full cost.
Okay.
So that's just an example.
Yeah.
You have $1 million in your bucket of money. Each time someone goes to the doctor, a claim is, we have an administrator who would say, hey, person A went to the doctor, you need to pay for this and it's gonna cost you $10. And it will keep continuing.
If they have a catastrophic event,
So
We have
that's the
stop
other
damage.
piece, right? So here are the layers. The layers are claims, administration, and for those catastrophic events, a stop loss policy. So there's three components: your claims portion, administration component, and also your stop loss. The additional cost on top of that is about 20% for administration and for your stop loss coverage. Your stop loss coverage is primarily driven by your claims experience. And if your claims experience are high, which they have been, you can expect that your stop loss premium will also be on the high side. The initial projection that we have going into FY21, there will not be a savings because in addition, you would have to cover your claims and then you'd have to now pay for your premium for your stop loss insurance and for your administration as well. So you would not save going into FY21 because of just how it's structured. So there's no savings in FY, you'll pretty much be neutral.
Can you just confirm if fiscal 18 was a self-insured year?
I would have to double check. When
18,
You said it was
18
3 years.
wait, 18 was a self, was,
That would have been a state plan.
no, state plan. 18 was a state plan, but that
Two.
includes a one-time windfall gain of moving from plan to
Moving
plan. So you have to
plan,
put that,
plan.
that was a $675,000 windfall gain of moving to the plan.
In fiscal 19?
And in the budget, was included in the budget, in this line, not in the old budget.
You're talking
I
about
mean, we
the
spent the
second
money somewhere else, but in 18-19, we had a $675,000
I guess,
windfall gain in this bucket.
one.
yeah.
But 17-18, school year 17-18 would have been the self-insured year.
Yes.
To compare it to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand when we talk about the ebbs and flows of going self-insured, what's the high and the low that we've historically seen? And when I look here, that first column, fiscal 17-18, it's 9.2, and that was a self-insured year. Then we go from 9.2 to 8.7 to 9.1 to then 10.3 this year, with an expectation of an additional 4% increase over the next 2 years.
Correct.
Okay.
At least for the past couple of years, though, we were presented with an analysis that showed we still had cost avoidance. We can't claim savings because
Right.
like we're still experiencing budget to budget increases, but we have a greater cost avoidance with this setup versus being self-insured.
But that cost avoidance is,
Meaning we would have had greater increases if we were still
Would
self-insured.
would we?
That was the analysis that we were presented.
So
I think it's all dependent on the claims for that year.
right. So again, a part of FinCo was that also to do an analysis to see where we are and how things are trending. I think historically for most districts, what they're seeing in terms of claims experience is that you would normally see an ebb and flow where you'll go a year or two high claims, then that would fall off, and then you'll get the savings from that, but then it would come right back up. I think overall, just in general, there's been an increase in health and just health insurance and overall for medical.
Yeah.
There's just been a general increase in just medical. There's a lot of districts who were not on the state partnership plan, who are seeing going into FY21 a significant increase in just what the premium increase year over year, and thus forcing them to go onto the state insurance plan. And again, a part of FinCo, and we will do this ongoing analysis because I think between now and April or May, we should get a better sense as to where we are, and we'll have a better claims experience to really say, hey, based on our claims experience for the past 2 years, we're seeing that low, and maybe it would make sense to shift back, but it's difficult to make that decision without a true deep dive into analysis. We do have a health insurance consultant. His initial projection or estimate was that we should remain on the state partnership plan because we just truly did not have enough data to say it makes sense to go back. Maybe in another 2-3 months, we'll have more data to say, you know what, based on the trend, it does make sense for us to shift back. But as of right now, we do not have that data that justifies going back to a self-insured model.
And we We do have some flexibility though in how much we, fund the internal services fund, over and above what we have now.
When you say, just to clarify?
We do have some flexibility.
We do, I mean, at the end of the year, we do have some flexibility. I think Gina had mentioned that we do need to work, that goes hand in hand with the Board of Finance, depending on the level of reserve
Yeah.
that they want to have at the time. So we do have some flexibility, but keep in mind that with that flexibility, that takes away from the cushion that we would have if in a year or two, we do decide to go back to self-insured model, because now, if you take from that bucket of money, now you have to build that money back up,
Right.
plus the fund. So either way,
And
whether
we
you,
haven't made contributions in a couple of years.
for FY '20, we have not. For FY '20, all dental claims, because we're still self-insured for all dental claims, all dental claims are getting paid from our internal services fund.
Yeah, and so the 369,000 that we're proposing to go to the internal services fund out of this number is really a buffer for really the dental
Claims.
the
Correct,
dental
yes.
claims.
I have two questions that I would like you to talk about.
Sure.
One is premium cost share, like I'm assuming that that's in the contracts, but I mean, is there a way to adjust that, is the first
That is,
question.
the premium cost share, that's the portion that's paid by the employees,
Yeah.
which is a negotiated rate. So we have just concluded, negotiation, I think, with all except for one union. So there is an, for FY '20, I do believe that for the WTA, their rate will remain flat. And I do
For the
believe
first year, they remain
they remain flat
and
with a
then it
1%
increases
increase
in the
for the subsequent years, each of the
subsequent
subsequent years.
Okay, and then my other question is the vendor that you use, do you say it's Aetna, it's Cigna, it's United, I mean, was there
The
any?
vendor that we use for which one?
For,
State plan.
for medical?
The state plan currently is Oxford, United Oxford.
Mhm.
That is being shifted. The state just made a decision that they're gonna go with Anthem. So we're hopeful that by shifting to Anthem, effective July 1, news for everyone.
Well,
don't-
it is
we don't-
good,
we
because
don't
they're
control
lower.
any of that, though.
Yeah, but they're
Correct.
making a
Well, we
good
would though
decision,
if we did it
frankly.
in-house.
No, well, so again, it's not just saying, hey, let's shift to Oxford, let's shift to Anthem. We truly need to look overall and what our claims are, because remember, once you are self-insured, everything is on you.
Mhm.
So it's
You
not,
meaning
it's not
the-
the administration, because Anthem United are the administrator. They're not, they don't,
No, I realize that. I guess what I'm, vexed by is that we have a stable population. So I don't understand why we can't make a projection as to if this is cost effective to self-insure or to fully insure.
you cannot anticipate you cannot anticipate health needs, because health need in 1 year is gonna vary, they vary year to year. So just because we have a stable population in terms of employment and we don't have a high turnover rate, that's one thing. However, this is health insurance, because you may be well this year, but we do not know what will happen.
And actually, the
Next
fact
minute.
that we only have 300 and something employees actually negatively impacts us from that
No, I get
standpoint, because
that.
you typically have a buffer of a
Right.
lot of healthy people
Right,
for that
I
one
understand
major
that.
illness. We don't necessarily have
I'm
that.
saying that you have claims experience year after year after year, like that's how you'd make that conclusion.
Okay, so again, everything is gonna be data driven. The board absolutely can make a decision that they want to go back to the self-insured model. But the board has to keep in mind that there's gonna be unpredictability in that model. Because yes, we may be on a low level for this year, but that may spike. And again, I do believe that is one of the main reasons why we shifted from self-insured to the state
Well,
partnership.
yeah, I
So
don't
that we
think,
have
yeah,
greater level of predictability.
yeah, I don't know I think that predictability is a risk as well. I mean, so
Yeah.
everything is a risk decision, right? So to some extent, the question really is, what level of unpredictability can we live with?
We
And
tolerate.
what does that cost? The cost benefit of having more volatility in your spend.
And
Correct.
let's be
I mean-
honest, this regionalization penalties from Hartford are unpredictable as well, right? I mean,
So again, I'll work with, our insurance consultant, we'll do some models to see what it is, and, I'll get something hopefully within a month or so to present to the board. Maybe I'll have a conversation, maybe he can come in and, speak a little bit more about the entire thing and maybe field some questions from you guys as well.
what did your prior district do? Were they self-insured or?
So the prior district, so for a few,
That
so,
was
so,
ugly.
here's how it went, right? So for a few years, we were like, we won't go to the self-insured, we won't go to the state plan because we're better off. But then our claims over 2 years, it spiked. So at that time, it was more favorable to go to the state partnership plan. Where in the first year, you do have that cost avoidance and that cost savings.
Savings first year.
In the
cost
first
avoidance
year,
going forward.
right, in that first year, but then over everyone, now on the partnership plan, is faced with this increase.
And I wanna say this, the difference between how Westport's situation played out and the Weston situation played out around that transition was very different. In Weston, our unions were, very cooperative in the decision to make the change for the savings. In Westport, it got very dirty, where they didn't wanna do it, and they delivered pink slips to a significant number of teachers to essentially force their hand. They said, if you don't give us the savings in health insurance, we're firing teachers.
Yeah.
It got really ugly.
Okay, I wasn't
See,
aware.
we have to be very careful in this.
Our
Do we,
teachers and
This-
administrators worked with us.
Now,
Do we
this
know-
bucket is, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do we know how our teachers feel about this? That's a very good question. Are
I do
people
not,
happy with this, or do they prefer the old?
I do not have a sense.
Probably have that.
With the insurance?
Yeah.
I mean, have you heard complaints?
I haven't heard complaints.
I think it's the switching around that just is.
The only complaint I've had, and this is what I'm thinking, but it probably doesn't do it, is we had to prove that we did all of these things by December 30th. Like, okay, did you do an eye exam, did you do this, cause if they didn't have the records, which was a real pain, I'm still trying to resolve mine. Does that mean when we go to Anthem, just, sorry, private question, we're gonna have to do that again?
We'll talk, I'll explain it.
Okay. That's the biggest complaint, like, oh my God, they don't have these.
The wellness piece of it.
Well, and also do all my doctors take
Yeah.
it.
I mean, that's the question.
One
I don't hear a lot of complaints about that.
Okay, so that's a good thing.
Sorry.
Can you talk about, I actually just don't know this, just for my own clarification, the dependent care between in-state, or between, self-insured and state-insured? Is it the same number of dependent care through the age of 21, or is there a difference?
So that doesn't change.
That doesn't change, okay,
correct,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
You know, the one thing we need to be careful is this, I think, is a decision that has to be based on some longer term trajectory.
Correct.
Because any opportunity any district has in any spike in expenses to change plans, to create capacity to invest in something else, they will normally mortgage the future to create more capacity in this category. So we have to think a little bit more long-term, because if it's just a one-year thing with a lot of risk, we're looking at it the wrong way.
And I think that first year, we would take a hit in reestablishing an internal services fund to be able to fund claims. We would take probably a big hit in year one, and that would be an interesting financing question that would definitely need, our partners on board
Well,
of finance
finance will,
involved,
yeah.
because it would be a unique
Yeah,
situation.
and they'll ask a lot about the future.
One foundational question, just to reground, just medical, for the 21 budget, the implicit increase assumption, including the regionalization penalty, is
10%.
10%, okay. So just some very round numbers, right?
Mhm.
If I take the 9,
Mhm.
right, and just round numbers for analysis, right?
What's the 9? Oh, the
9
9 million, yeah.
Yeah, I take out the 3 for the contribution for dental.
So it's in that line? Is the 3 in that line?
It is included, correct.
Okay, so you get to
Almost four, let's say 4, it's more 4 than 3.
Okay.
Okay, fine,
8.7.
okay.
And then I compare it to 7.7, so would that be an apples to apples comparison?
So one more time, so you're going the 7.7 for 18 for the budget year?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
is that a fair comparison?
yeah, it is,
Okay, so that's an implicit 13% increase,
okay.
but the assumption is 10%.
The assumption is 10%, but you have to,
But then if you have FTE increase,
that's correct.
right, so that delta is by those 7 to 9 people that.
Plus or minus or whatever it is, correct, yeah.
Just level magnitude,
Right.
7 people will drive a 3% increase in your health insurance.
Okay,
Cause it's roughly
That's
what,
a very good
if
point.
it's,
It's a good point,
if
yeah.
it's a person taking family, it's roughly 30,000.
it's roughly $30,000.
So it just shows the sensitivity of headcount versus
Right.
Yeah.
increase in health,
And the
Correct.
implication to
which
insurance.
means small potatoes.
It's not,
No.
no, it's
And
not.
once we have that
That's
fully
interesting
loaded
framing.
employee cost, we'll
Right.
be able to look at that a little more.
So, but you guys have to also keep in mind, not everyone who's an employee takes medical benefits.
And we did try last year, just in case newer board members aren't aware, we did try last year to offer an incentive to people to not take insurance.
In what form?
Essentially, we offered them, essentially a payment, saying we'll pay you X amount of dollars if you don't take insurance. We did not get enough people to take the plan to make it work. That was part of the federal process
That
last
was
year.
one of the sad things I heard
It's
about.
on the spouse's
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah,
I
maybe
mean,
others, but, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Still,
We have to
go figure,
package
right?
it a little.
Yeah.
Better.
So just on that note, we probably should move to the capital budget.
What?
Okay, go ahead.
Not health insurance. This has to do with the Seymour's pension.
Yes.
I know that comes out in April. Have you heard any rumblings coming from Hartford? Because last year we got hit with a penalty
We did.
because they did not have a proper rate of return on the pension.
That is correct.
And then I read an article the other day, they were still questioning the rate of return. Have you heard any rumblings about what might, like, what the
No.
real might be?
We do not, this is based, so once they came up with that adjusted rate, they sent us, just a rate increase over the next, I think it was for FY '24. So for each subsequent each year, there's a 2% increase, to Seymour's.
Is that what you factored in here?
That is
what
factored in,
you're
correct.
doing?
Yeah, that was tough last year, cause I think that came down
In
from the
April.
state,
In April.
in
Yeah.
April.
Yep.
Right in the
Like
middle
the
of the
day
budget.
before Board of Finance.
Yeah, I think a lot of
was
people
like,
got hit with that one.
ridiculous.
One thing is, one of the things I wanted to get some clarity on, and just like top level, if we can actually look at the budget, you broke it out in the beginning of the book, the budget last year, and then the increments, the two increments, meaning, obligations and then everything else that come up to the 5.5%. Can you break that down into a couple of additional lines? For example, budget last year, right? The increase, that's based on the fact that if we had, the budget last year was based on 355 head count, right? So just the contractual increases in salaries and benefits of those 355 employees, right?
I'm listening to it.
Plus another line is the increase in salaries and benefits of the additional employees that we're going to hire between the 355 and the 363, right? Just break down a little bit, if everything stayed the same, except all we actually had were contractual obligations. And, what would that be? What did we add in salaries and benefits of the additional delta in employees?
For FY '20,
Now do it for
FY '21,
21, a budget to budget,
okay.
right? And then everything else.
But just, if I remember correctly, from FY '20 through FY '21, I think we're only calling for maybe a 1 point something increase. It's not a significant increase, because what you're seeing from FY '20 is the addition of those other additional paraprofessionals, which happened for this year.
Yeah, but I'm looking budget to budget, just budget to
But the
budget.
paraprofessionals wouldn't have been in our budget.
It wouldn't have been in our budget.
There weren't in budget from FY '20, so
Right.
do you want to strip the
Yes, I
Yeah.
want to strip all of
Okay, so
the
straight
hires
budget.
out
Okay.
first, and say, what if we basically, everything was the same, budget to budget, right? What would be the salary and benefit increase of the 355 that were budgeted last year?
Okay.
What is the salary and increase delta of the difference in headcount between the budget for the 21 proposed budget versus the 20 proposed budget,
Okay.
all right? And then everything else.
Okay. All right, I think when we presented, we showed that just in terms of everything else, but I'll piece it together for you.
Right, but
Just
the only
pure budget
thing
to
we haven't,
budget.
I just wanted to see what the delta is of the additional headcount we're adding, which is the 355 to the 363, some of which we added already.
That is correct.
But let's just go budget to budget,
So budget to budget, okay.
budget to budget.
one.
Okay, so,
But Tony, you keep in mind that I'm not quite sure what exactly this will show you, because the current staffing levels, forget any additional ads, but our current staffing levels are the current staffing levels, including the paraprofessional that's needed. So I'm not quite sure what the benefit is by looking on a budget to budget.
I think what people are trying to get to is, our contractual increase, let's just, for simplicity's sake, is 2%.
Right.
But we're seeing a bigger than 2%
we're seeing a
increase,
4.22%.
and that's
in
because
salaries and
we've
wages.
added
Added.
headcount compared to what we budgeted.
That's correct.
That's
Like
right.
if we were flat
So flat it out.
FTE, if we were flat FTE between the approved budget that we have to work with and the budget we're considering, we should see only the 2% increase.
Okay.
Since we've had headcount movements
It's muddy.
post that budget, I think people are trying to see the impact of pure contract and then
What the
new
new
hires
headcount added.
subsequent to budget, and what's any additional budgeted, I guess is also a way to say it, so that we can see the two pieces.
Right, I think, yeah, I mean, we did have just an overall, I think we're looking at about 2.54%, but I'll strip that out further so you can see it
Mhm.
delineated.
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect. It's been a long week, Phil.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's all right,
Only Wednesday.
just getting started.
Capital.
Capital. Now, just the mechanics, we approved the operating budget, that's the Board of Education, and we also approved the capital budget. The Board of Finance will then opine on the two, and they will basically, if there's further adjustments to be made in the operating budget, it will not be a line item by line item, it will be a bulk adjustment that then we will go back and figure out how to basically include that in the next version of the budget. When it comes to the capital budget, they will have line by line approval of the
And that
capital
extends
budget.
to the town referendum as well.
And the town referendum as well. So maybe a little bit of a background in how these were, put together. I think it's really resulting ultimately from, the phase one facility study and all the priority items that came out from that, where then the creation of a 10-year facilities plan, which I think people have the little booklet, and then a phasing of, which includes a prioritization and a phasing of the capital items over the next 10 years, right? And so maybe we can go through the line items and discuss them a little bit so that everyone has a good feel for where some major work needs to be done.
What we have from last year, still in lieu, is the chiller replacement at the elementary school and possibly the hot water heater at the high school. The chiller, we have just hired RZ Design to come in and do a complete analysis of the chiller and all the air handlers that are in the attic, which feed the 5 spaces. So those numbers could possibly change. We have to do, by the end of this month, we will have a longevity test done on the hot water heater at the high school, to make sure that it will last. I was proactive with that one only because the WIS hot water heater, which is put in at the same time, failed 2 years ago. That was a pretty simple repair that was done in 3 days.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Hillary just raised a point that I wanna ask, and that is, as we go through this, I'm thinking, the number 1.1 is already approved, correct? This is
No.
all,
No.
none of this
No.
is approved?
Only
well, we
fiscal year 20,
Fiscal year 20 was officially approved through the entire process.
Right.
The board, I don't know if voted is the right word, but the board reached a consensus to send the 1.16 million number into the town process to get started talking with building committee and the town about coordinating
Right.
the fulfillment of those projects if they are ultimately approved by all parties associated.
yeah.
Which happens,
Yeah, so
later.
they are aware, I mean, the town, the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, the Building Committee, they're aware of these numbers.
this discussion today is moot, or is it that we will reconsider some of these numbers at some point
I
if
don't
need
think,
be?
I think that
I'm still very interested in hearing all the lines.
I
but
think we need to educate ourselves on the lines.
Yeah.
But I think that discussion will probably come, after the discussion with the Board of Finance, because, I think there'll be some discussions along the way with the Building Committee and the Board of
I see.
Finance and the Board of Selectmen.
I
But,
see, fine.
but under town charter.
Yeah.
At the end of January, we will need to officially vote on these as part of our budget process. That doesn't mean that they can't be revisited, but under town charter, we legally do have to vote on our operating and our capital items by the end of January to move them forward.
Yeah, to move them forward, and the Board of Finance will look at this, very carefully as well. We'll
Before
have
the
a fulsome
30th.
What's that?
Before
No.
the 30th.
No,
No.
no, after,
Board of
that's
Finance
the
doesn't
board,
get it till
Okay,
March.
fine.
March, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And
Okay.
last year, we did just that, we
Yep.
looked at it as part of this process,
Yep.
and I think there was this modest refinement of the capital budget in
Okay.
January.
I think, Gina, just to refresh my memory, the Board of Finance has historically expected, what, around 700?
It was around between 6 and 8
Right.
was the historical average that we had been running.
Right.
We made it very clear last year because, the 295 is just the open projects left over. Last year, we were over $1 million.
Right,
And we made it very clear to them that $1 million was more the target range of year-over-year spend on capital projects. We made that very clear last year when we were going through the capital discussions, which is why you see the phasing over the next 3 years being right around that $1 million range. So that the total number shouldn't be a surprise to anybody on the other side of School Road.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mike.
That's okay. So with the high school hot water heater, I wanted to be proactive with that because the elementary school, the intermediate school hot water heater failed in December of 17. Same year installation, same hardness of water. So I wanted to get that in the budget, being the emergency shelter. It takes care of the kitchen, it takes care of the showers for the gymnasium. It's pretty much a run all year round. That test will be taken care of by the end of this month, if not the second week of February. The reason for us not being as far along as we are, as we got through with the building committee and with RZ Design, this was a recommendation that they had put through for the project. And also with the elementary chiller, they want to do a complete analysis of all the air handlers, which was also added on to this year in the last building committee meeting. So that's why that is different, that's why that's still lingering from last year. We were hoping to have it done, elementary school chiller this April break. It's not gonna happen through April break, it has to be done during the summer, it's just too much of a lead time for the material and equipment. Okay, now lines 3.
Mike,
Yeah.
I just wanna ask Tony a quick question.
Mhm.
Tony, where are we with the process now that this further collaboration with building committee is happening? These 2 projects were voted on with a certain dollar value, and now with all the additional studies, and I'm not opining on the benefit of the studies or not, but Tony, where are we as far as the funding of those as compared to possibly having to go back and get supplements to actually fully fund these projects, since they were voted on a year ago, monies were restricted, and then now the process is being totally revamped? How's the town handling funding of all these
I
studies
think
that
the
building
town is
committee's
aware
doing?
that these numbers, now are viewed as placeholders, and there will probably, the cost of this will probably be significantly higher.
So who's taking ownership of any potential additional ask for this? Back to the whole conversation we've been
Yeah.
going back and forth with the building committee about if it is a school project, or the school's
It's,
responsible for
I
managing,
think the
or
building,
if it's a
yeah.
town project, is the town
Yeah.
responsible? Who's driving the bus at this point?
the Board of Ed, because I think that what has happened is that, certain individuals have taken it upon themselves to go for, supplemental appropriations that before we really assessed how much we actually need. I think we're clear now that the Board of Ed is gonna drive the process of going back and asking for more money if we need it.
Including paying for these studies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Now, that's not gonna be an easy discussion, but that's, you know.
Sorry, I just wanted to process clarification.
Okay, now lines 3 and lines 8 have been pretty much put on hold as to just not knowing what's gonna happen with the middle school. So the talk was to not put any substantial dollar amount into the building. So the lockers are gonna be on hold, any kind of renovation to the pool.
That's not
No,
the building committee's decision
No,
to
that's
make.
not, no, I
That
think
is
that's
not
the
his decision to make.
yeah, I think that will be, that's the recommendation of the building committee, but that's this, what I said is that's fine if that's your recommendation, but that's still a discussion that's gonna stay in here, still a discussion with the Board of Finance, and we'll make our case for the prioritization of that, and we'll discuss that. But it's fair, you have the ability to make your recommendations, right? And the recommendation was that until we know what we're doing with the middle school, we're not gonna put a dollar in, and I said, well, there's certain things we're gonna have to deal with, lockers and other tactical stuff.
Right, in
before
real
we make
time
those.
for current
Right.
students, yeah.
And so that's decision, again, I appreciate your recommendation, but that's not something, we're gonna keep this in there and go forward.
And if the lockers were to be put in, they are movable. They could be put into different schools where they don't have updated lockers.
That's true.
Anything that goes to the middle school, 7th and 8th grade, could easily move to D-wing, E-wing of the high school without a problem, and there'd be a much better upgrade.
High schoolers don't use
We don't
lockers.
use the lockers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think
they're there.
you.
No, but to your point,
Yeah.
it's not lost. I mean, middle school
They
students are
wouldn't-
going to need lockers,
Right,
right?
Right.
Wherever they end up, if we,
that's correct.
so they can be moved, it's an investment that is not lost
And I think
on a building that might be lost.
with the replacement of sixth grade lockers over the summer, I think
That's
the
highlighted.
feedback, the feedback
highlighted
was
issues.
that it was very well received, because the students do use the lockers in the middle
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
Line 7, I'm just gonna jump around to school. So still remaining in the middle school, this is going to be a project that's gonna be taken care of in-house. This is gonna be C21, 2, 3, and 4. Getting rid of the cabinetry on the sink walls. They have 3 bay sinks, 2 faucets, sediment traps, miscellaneous plumbing equipment for the yard. We're gonna take care of that in-house. That'll be our guys putting it in, installing. It'll be stainless steel, 3 bay sinks, 3 faucets, new sediment traps so they can drain a little better. The equipment over there is just outdated, doesn't run well, doesn't drain well, so they're constantly waiting for drainage so they can keep going with the cleaning. It's gonna be very similar to the STEM location look, stainless steel, almost like a commercial kitchen. Limited storage, but they don't have any storage under the cabinets anyway. It's all sediment trap and miscellaneous paper. They're okay with it, they like the idea, they're happy for any kind of upgrade that we can do over there. And again, that'll be 4 rooms, 4 3 bay sinks, sediment trap, different faucets, and so to speak.
And I guess just this is a silly question over $20,000, but these sinks, if we close the middle school down in a
Anywhere.
couple of years,
They can go
you
anywhere.
have needs of, these are basic
Sure.
stainless steel sinks, you can use them in any of our facilities.
We definitely could, absolutely. We definitely could take 2 right away and bring them right to the elementary school art room. We have to build some sort of platform for the kids to stand on, but they can be moved right away.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, back to the elementary school, line 4. This is the east house steam traps and heat control, similar to the project that we did in the south house, which would upgrade our system to a building management system as opposed to a compressor system, which is just compressed air, which runs the thermostats. This way I could see, the guys could see any kind of issue that we have with the room, below temperature, too high temperature. Steam traps they're fouled out, they all need to be replaced as it is anyway. We have controls that are antiquated with compressed air. We have copper lines in the concrete walls that are starting to pit, so we're not running efficiently, we're not heating the space where we need to be heating the space. This has been okayed by the committee. We've already hired RZ Design to go through and come up with a comparable valve like we have in the south house to run the system. So this will move forward this summer with the eyes of the building committee and with RZ Design as the eyes with the analysis. Now, high school, lines 5 and line 6. This is C-wing and D-wing. They're unit ventilators. This is gonna be put on hold strictly because the hope is in years to come, D-wing and C-wing is going to match the exterior look of E-wing. How we had done that back in 2013, 14 with the windows, taller windows, getting rid of the unit ventilators, putting heat in, split systems. So those, unfortunately, if we were to replace the unit ventilators and we were to upgrade to the facade and the exterior look of the E-wing, couldn't be used anywhere else. So that would just be installing the unit ventilators
That's
for a
the
couple of years.
515,000
Yeah.
project
And the
5.
115.
Yeah.
So that's 630 coming out.
Mhm.
That's good.
And again, if I may, so this is with the assumption that the Board of Ed wants C and D to mirror E.
Well, I think this is where we're looking for your recommendations, which will ultimately, in my view, what we're getting is the town's assessment,
Correct.
and their recommendation. I think if your recommendation if you're in line and we see a path forward, that's fine. But if your recommendation is different,
Let us know.
we want to hear it because we need to make that argument to the Board of Finance.
Sure.
And this decision is a Board of Education decision with the recommendation of, the building committee will recommend to the selectmen and the Board of Finance, but it's a recommendation. Ultimately, it's our decision as to how we want to prioritize.
So you have our ear to make your case.
Right. I mean, at this point, if there is any possibility in the next 2 or 3 years of it looking and mirroring E-wing, I would say we hold off, because I can't see throwing away this kind of money.
Yeah,
on
but what
something
kind of price tag does that renovation have?
I think,
To rewrap cell block C
yeah, I
and D?
wanna say the E-wing project in 14 was, 1.2, 1.3 million to mirror. No, I know that's a far stretch to be possible,
So now, I mean, you're probably looking at it being $2 million, just
possibly, sure.
then plus, I mean, are we,
Mhm.
I guess, Lisa, I'm gonna look to you now from, like, C and D wing. Are they functional in their current construction? Is the wrap more aesthetic? Does this wrap project provide educational benefit? Like, I'm just saying, are we really gonna spend $2 million to make it look pretty, or is there $2 million that's gonna achieve
It's
something?
air quality also.
It's air quality, it's terrible in those rooms.
But I mean, I'm saying this, building committee is saying delay this project, which fixes the air quality and the air conditioning issues, because we may do some sort of wrap to like make C and D wing look like E wing on the outside.
Right, unit ventilators would be a great upgrade, but if there is any possibility of having a mirror E-wing, E-wing is a much better.
No, I'm gonna be clear, that the renovation that was done to E-wing was a tremendous improvement to the high school. The front of the high school looks, has looked wonderful, but when you're in those classrooms in the back, before that renovation, lack of lighting, the ventilation in that room, the air conditioning.
Yeah, I never really looked at it, excuse me, Ken, as aesthetic.
Well, that's what I'm trying, that's what we're
Give
trying.
us air,
Yeah,
please.
I don't see.
I mean, those
No,
rooms
I'm
that
not,
we have
I'm
two
not questioning the
windows.
air, but what he's saying is like, almost like full renovation versus fixing the air issues.
Well, a unit ventilator to unit ventilator would just lessen our cost on repairs.
Right.
But if it could be mirrored to some of an E-wing with the air conditioning addition,
Yeah.
as well as a common return and fresh air system for the hallways and for the classrooms, that's just a completely different animal. It would be a much better upgrade. So that's why my thought is, if there is a possibility of that happening, that we sit on it for a little while.
Right, I mean, it's $600,000 towards that better, longer-term, higher quality renovation down the road. See, it's,
No, I just wanted to understand how the two pieces fit together.
Yeah, it's not compatible,
Yeah,
so E-wing now has what's called fin tube heat on the perimeter of the exterior wall. It has a common rooftop unit which feeds fresh air, tempered air, and return air, fresh air quality into the rooms. It has split system air conditioning in the ceilings. Now, if we were to just put the unit ventilators in, all that's gonna give you is heat and a ground mounted, floor mounted heating system. No cooling, fresh air will have on the exterior ground. It's not even comparison to different quality.
Is your recommendation then for us to hold off?
I would, yeah, absolutely. If there's a chance, and we'll know in the next year or two, and we could revisit just a unit ventilator swap in a year or two, or possibly 3, I'd rather sit on it, yeah, because they're not usable anywhere else.
So is the
Yeah.
right answer, instead of asking for 630 for these 2 specific things, it's important, in the ideal world, you wanna have your capital spend be relatively stable. Do you ask for some portion of this, essentially to establish a fund for this
Yes.
project? So we
Yes.
put like a
That's a good
chunk in,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
each year to
Okay.
work
Yeah.
up to the
To,
project?
yeah.
Great.
Great
Okay.
idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Okay.
Now, Mike, I have a question about the roofing, high
Okay.
school roof.
Yep.
Because we've been talking a lot about that in committee meeting.
Right.
So can you kind of update the
Just
team?
speed, sure.
Yeah.
Again, hired RZ Design, Al Jasinski. He came in about 3 weeks ago and did a complete analysis of the concrete facade of, I believe it's 7 locations in the high school, anything that's raised on the old section. So we're hoping by the end of next week, we're gonna have some numbers as a figure as to what they're gonna do to resurface, to re-caulk. We have caulk joints between the concrete and the brick and the metal flashing, and the metal flashing and the rubber roof. All needs to be taken care of. They're not sure exactly how this happened. Rebar that was put into the concrete was too close to the surface, so it came through. Rust, oxidation started breaking away concrete. It started getting itself behind the concrete, and it would get into the brick, broke out the brick. So it's a pretty big job. It's a pretty entailed job to repair. No pricing has been put through with this yet. He came through, he's gonna do a complete set of drawings. He's gonna do, with pictures, a whole presentation of what needs to be done and how it'll be broken down. The cost is, they don't even have a guess at this point. He did something similar, I wanna say it was a little bit smaller location, it was about $750,000. Not as bad as what we're looking into, but he didn't even have a guesstimate of what he was talking about for pricing for what the repair would be to resurface everything.
When would they want to do this repair?
This summer.
So we need to build.
We need
We
to
need
actually
to
build that in, so that's
there,
where it's gonna
yeah.
go.
Yeah.
This was one of those popped up about 2 months ago, and they just started working on it.
Oh, wow.
So we need to build that, we need to build
Yeah, we
potentially that
discussed-
into this.
Yeah, adding that in and putting some sort of a placeholder,
Mhm.
until we get an accurate.
And that should be by the end of next week, what Al had said.
I would suggest amending this schedule as soon as possible though.
Yeah.
To at least include the project, and even if you put, $600,000 with an asterisk saying, purely will, hold for, estimate arriving X date. Because I think the public is starting to look at this, at
Yeah.
this document,
Mhm.
and I think having it as close to accurate as you can.
Yeah.
So just also, I think you mentioned that there is possibility for, thank goodness we haven't had any leakage, but if it's not fixed
It definitely
ASAP,
could
we're
cause
looking for
leaks.
possible water damage.
Right.
Okay, just so that you guys are aware.
So this is gonna be 1.9 million then?
Well, if we take out this 630.
I think we take out
Or
the-
we're taking it out, I thought we were leaving it in.
Well, I made that suggestion before I heard
Right,
the
before we were-
750, before I heard
Yeah.
750
Okay.
for that.
Okay, so what is this number gonna end up at?
I should know by the end of next week.
Okay.
It'll
Al
be
should
more
have
like
his analysis
1.3
done.
or one, yeah.
We could shift
Yeah.
some numbers around.
So as we shift, if we're not gonna do a C and D wing, I do recommend that we also include, a number for, any unanticipated repairs or replacement that will be needed for those unit ventilators. Cause as we know, all of these units are historic.
Enraged.
So we do need to have some kind of reserve account for repairs, or for repairs or
Well,
replacement.
You do have a reserve for repairs,
We do?
right, don't you?
We-
Not for these specific.
Not for
but-
those particular units.
Right,
And I think anything outside of that is gonna have an impact to our operating budget. So to minimize the hit on our operating budget, I do believe, and I do believe the building committee is okay with that, but I think we definitely need to build something in.
Like what?
I'm not quite sure, we definitely need to look into that, maybe 100 or so This is a reserve. I mean, if we don't use that money, it flows into that larger project.
You're talking about a capital reserve.
Correct.
Okay.
Capital reserve, not operating reserve.
Gotta be very careful about repairs and how that's viewed in terms of the capital budget, right?
Well, but the ventilator system thingy, that's big enough, that would be capital. Now, if you're talking about going in and, buying, a $5,000
Right.
motor and replacing,
Yeah.
that's a repair, not a
No, I'm
capital
all for
project.
it, I just.
If you're talking
Yeah.
about creating a reserve to ultimately do the big project,
yeah.
that's fine,
That would go
but,
into it, yeah, no, I agree.
but I mean, I think that,
Yeah.
I think getting that other project listed, and we're gonna have to revisit that because numbers getting big.
And one other project I had been working on, it hasn't even made the sheet. It was soundproofing to the music classrooms in high school and the middle school. Finally, we have a gentleman that we work with in New York City who's come in and he got me some pricing. We're looking roughly about $40,000 to do 6 classrooms, and 3 in the middle school, 3 in the high school. So I will add that into here as well. This is going to be, we have 3 rooms that are similar to here. It's just drop-in ceiling panels for soundproofing. We have in the high school, we have concrete grid, which would be 3 foot by 3 foot sections that we'll do in-house. We'll just pay for the material through capital, and our guys will put it in. We would steam mounting equipment, very minimal, but somewhere in that $38,000 to $40,000 mark for soundproofing. We've had teachers, and then the recent complaint of hearing loss or headaches or what have you, so something that we need to
It's
jump on.
loud in there. And it echoes.
And if you recall, I don't remember who asked me, what's the next level of work at the high school? Was it you, Ruby? What the focus is?
Yeah.
We gotta do something about this,
Oh, yeah, during my tour,
the
we did
music.
talk about that, yes.
or no, it was here, it's bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you wanna get your
It's-
black box studio.
When you go and you see the other facilities for music and all of that, it's embarrassing, and you've been very receptive within the financial constraints we have, and I appreciate that, Mike.
No problem.
And
Um,
Phil, getting carpeting, things like that.
So we should, then, as we go to the next round of budget discussions, this should be updated to
Absolutely.
reflect truly what we recommend.
I may have a question that may be a little bit unfair, but just broadly, as we do capital improvements in our infrastructure and the equipment, do you have a point of view on the warranties we've gotten on those equipments and these repairs? How do they fall within the warranty parameters of those purchases?
Anything that we've done in the past 4 or 5 years has been built in the 60s, so there is no
Okay. We're
warranty.
way past the.
We're way past, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
By about 50 years.
Yeah, they're not gonna cover.
That was easy.
All right.
Thanks,
Um,
Mike.
Thank you.
So anywhere, we have a little time left, anywhere else in the book, you have questions on? Maybe bigger
Did we
questions?
skip over anything last?
Yeah, we did.
What did we skip over?
Let's,
Not that they're critical, but,
district administration,
well,
we can go through that.
So there,
I know,
Sure.
sorry.
no, go ahead.
I know Lewis is not here, but the outside legal counsel, we know pretty much why that went up, but I think we have to be prepared to be able to talk about it, when asked, tomorrow, et cetera. And obviously, there's some confidentiality on how much you can talk about that, but does anyone wanna comment on that? Lewis, in lieu of Lewis,
No, I just think that we have had,
how we frame this.
yeah, we'll talk about that and think about that as a team. But for right now, I just think, we've had more issues, more legal claims that we've had to deal with, and it's beyond what, we have typically experienced. What Lewis handles is internal counsel. It's just one of those years where we've had, spike.
And these are around expulsions, these are around sped, this is around FOIA requests, is anything else, and can you
Well, I
name it
know-
that way in
well,
meetings?
We have to be very general, we can't get into specifics, so yeah, categories. is
This
probably the best
number-
Are
way to
those
do it.
categories
This number would
allowed
not
to be
include
discussed?
a
Yeah,
special
it's not
ed.
bad.
Oh, no, no.
This is
Right.
excluding special ed.
Well, no, it's, yeah,
This
it's,
particular number.
yeah, this particular number, absolutely, yeah.
So can you go over the large, broader categories of what's,
I'd rather have Louis do that,
Okay.
just given just the sensitive nature of this.
We were
We
thinking
had
of,
talked about maybe having him prepare something in executive session to give
Executive
a
session,
broader
a little bit
color
of it,
about the
yeah.
pressures on that number.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I'm not so I don't need that. I mean, we can do it, but I'm more thinking about how to discuss it publicly, yeah.
Well, I think the board needs to understand it, and then the other side of that is how we discuss it publicly.
Yeah,
I-
no, I think
yeah.
I do.
I need to understand why, if it happened this year, we now have this perception that this is an ongoing thing. Like, that's where I'm a little bit lost, so.
I think once you guys have that executive session, that may shed light on the
Okay.
overall picture.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, Phil, on page 22, or sorry, 122, it says that the legal fees for this year is 150, but then on page 124, it says 125. Can you just confirm which is correct?
Sure.
Oh, Shipman and Goodman is.
Yeah, that should be the 150.
The one thing to keep in mind in this tab is that this is, when you, most of the administrators are actually, in the separate cost centers. So, this administrative tab is sort of the ones that, the remainder of what's not in each one of the cost centers.
That's right.
Right? So it's not really district administration, it's what is remaining of district administration that is not in the other cost centers, right?
It's half. It's three of the central office and the other three, Mike, myself, and Craig are in the other cost
And the
centers.
principals and the assistant
Principals,
principals,
obviously.
assistant-
Yeah, I
And
thought you-
Everybody's separated into the cost centers, right?
And then one number on here that I'm not seeing a breakdown for, if I'm missing it, I apologize, is the, superintendent consultants through 309. I mean, I know some of that is just a ballpark for initiatives that Bill's gonna need consultants on, but do we have an idea?
I think it changes year over year. Yeah, I don't think there's anything set, as you mentioned, it has to do with the initiatives that vary year over year.
Sometimes that's with the retreat
Yeah.
and the professional development, that he's providing, working
Yeah,
through with the
my
leadership team.
my thoughts on that, caveat being we all know things pop, but if we could have an understanding of the path that we might be going down, at least.
Well, I think that's gonna come through in the budget details, right? When you're gonna provide the budget details.
No, that is not. I mean, we've already listed items in the consultant line, but for this particular line item, there isn't any additional detail.
Oh,
But that would just be maybe something that Bill can speak of.
Well, how much is gonna be spent this year on that?
I think the trend for this year, I have to double check, but I think we're close to that, and I think we wanted to get close to where we were. I think for this year, we have, Mike, remind me of the name again, for the school climate study?
National School Climate Center.
Yeah, so that's also included in that initiative for this year.
Right.
I just don't have the exact amount right now.
That was about 5,500 for that,
Right.
for that particular survey.
55?
Correct.
And then, it's a nominal amount, but I still have to ask the question around overtime. I would think that overtime would be needed if there's maybe reduction in staff or, sickness or something else, and right now, we're looking at overtime budgeted 7,000 on last year's 1,000. Can you just elaborate on that?
So this is due to the, increase, in time that's needed to respond to FOIA requests. We've had, some significant FOIA requests this year that have required a team of our support staff to find time to be able to complete that, and it is still ongoing. So when you look at their hourly rates and the number of hours, we've projected out over the course of this year that time, and you know, if this were to continue, this would be what we'd be looking at, you know, for next year.
So you're saying the run rate spend in 2020 is above 1,000?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe the way the narrative is, just in terms of scope of responsibility, as I read this, the whole paragraph on payroll, accounting, and auditor, so I'm assuming that all rolls up into you?
Correct. So as we leaf into, in terms of the details that I provided, Ruby, I know a lot of it was driven primarily out of payroll. So I just put together just a quick change as to where we were, just a quick analysis year over year.
Thank you.
As I had mentioned, a lot of the data that you will see, and I know it will come up as to a particular line this year that says turnover, adjustment, and transfers. That will require a deeper dive just to paint that full picture. I just wanted to put that caveat out there. But in terms of a year-over-year growth, everything is listed here.
Yeah, so here's where I guess I'm not understanding, this goes back to the process, because I am under the impression that the salary and wages are built bottoms up. So each principal will go through and show the movement in FTE and then the cost implication, which then bubbles up
Yes.
to, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then you have all
So
of that.
it's here, but
Okay.
again, so I don't think we've ever provided like the steps and everything else. But what we've shown if there's any adjustment, like for example, take a look at the steps
Okay,
and then
okay,
let me
and then
know
I'll
if you're
have
missing anything.
Did we talk about security already?
In executive session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you wanna talk about it today?
Yeah, let's be, I mean,
It's okay,
Let's
we
be-
don't have to. We
no,
did
I
talk
just,
about
I
the
just,
executive-
I just think that there, yeah, whatever we can actually, I think whatever is appropriate to talk about in a public setting, that's fine.
Sure.
Yeah, we just have to be,
Just be,
just be careful about,
Okay.
if there's something that we think needs to be in executive session, then we can just,
Yeah, I'll leave it. Thank you.
what, have you, Bill, can you just take us through
Sure.
quickly?
So what I wanted to do, I mean, Ruben had mentioned that we did not have the detail or the change in terms of salary, the detail for that. So what I pretty much did was just highlight it across the board, all our locations, started with our FY '20 budget, and pretty much all the changes that happened to get us to where we are for our request for FY '21. So this is all the pluses and the minuses and all, and pretty much everything else. And again, yes, Ruby, it is built from the bottom up
Okay.
and based on our recurrent staffing and the relevant steps that each one would go to for next year. So that's also built in, which will never be reflected here because that's just a natural step movement that's been negotiated. But in terms of any other the detailed change of the pluses and minuses, those are highlighted here.
Well, this is very useful.
Speaking of the step movement, one of the, actually, never mind.
I think the answer to my question is probably
In the budget.
built, maybe built into this, but anyway, we could still summarize
The
it.
budget, sure.
now we have some other documents, you know, for the sake of time, if you prefer, since we've lost a couple of board members today, do you want us to just email those? Cause I have, Durgay class size comparisons, I have the,
Yeah, let's,
you know, a lot of that stuff. Do you
let's just
wanna
pass it out
pass
and
Yeah.
then
like
email
this?
it.
That would be great.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
so
pass it out and
these are
email it.
things that likely come up tomorrow in curriculum committee. We have the time there set aside, we can talk about it. So here are the Durgay class size comparisons, the caps and the actual ranges for the Durg. High school co-curricular activity participation numbers, as well as the middle school ones in a second document. And then, someone had asked about this was Gina asked about the middle school teaming document that was presented last February at curriculum committee. It was just kind of a look at, how things could change from a teaming perspective. It's a packet going along. Mike, you also have a document?
Right, so I made, Ruby, in response to your questions in the document that was not included this year, it's a trend analysis and identification rate analysis for special education.
Great.
Going back to 2014.
Great.
Can you give me a date on the, oh, never mind. The teaming model was February 2019.
Yes, on the bottom.
Yeah,
It's on the
okay.
bottom. Now, you can see we've been doing our homework. We're prioritizing, trying to get you the information.
Yeah, thank you.
It is coming a little bit piecemeal, but hopefully, you're getting the information you need in a timely fashion, so.
Yeah, as Tony said, we're like on the cusp of moving to adjustment
Yeah, no,
phase of this, so this is really.
yeah, and I appreciate, the questions and, I really built a lot of time, helping, the board understand the budget, which is, I think,
Thank
is the goal of this segment, which, hopefully it's been meeting your needs.
Very much.
I think there's a couple of errors in this, just looking at it.
Where do you
From the high
think?
school.
I,
You got it from your secretary.
no, our chart was completely different, I'm
Okay, well-
opening it up, because Short Wharf is not a high school program. I mean, I can go through,
Okay, yeah,
And
that
show
should be
you
on
our-
the middle school
I can
document.
share you the, document that we have.
Yeah, let's have it on this middle school. There you go. Oh,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
Phil, just,
Right here.
from a hiding sighting perspective, if we could just note all of the supplemental information that was needed this
Absolutely.
year and next year can just be included.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Just let me know if that format that I gave you with everything across, if that's a preferred format, or
Okay,
if you want everything back
okay,
on the individual tabs.
okay.
I just wanna express my, thanks for all the hard work that everyone has put
Here,
into this.
Yes.
It is an extraordinary amount of detail that has to be summarized, consolidated, presented at the right level. I know that
In a timely
there are
manner.
places where we wish we could have had more information. And I think that, hopefully everyone has asked their questions so that we got that information that we need. But we do appreciate the amount of effort and hard work it takes to put this together and then to answer our questions, along the way. I think that it's, the next step, in my view, is to really get the board moving to some of the bigger items that we probably wanna talk about in terms of adjustments to the budget. And adjustments to the budget are not only about cuts, they're also about looking at resource allocation, as well. And, yes, the budget's gonna move from where it is proposed now to something else, which is going to be a smaller number. But that's really not what it's about. It's about looking at how we allocate our resources, making sure that everything is necessary, but where can we actually create some capacity to make sure that we have the ability to invest in those things that truly affect our students. And I think that's really the lens we have to look at this in. There's the affordability criteria, which I think the situation in town as well, and the financial challenges. And so none of this, all of this has to be, brought into this conversation. And hopefully we end up in a spot where we feel we've done the best we can with the amount of resources that we feel is appropriate to spend on education. And that's going to be ultimately a townwide decision. think the Board of Education is going to basically come to some consensus and approve a number, but, you know, it's ultimately only one piece of it. The Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and ultimately, through the town referendum, the citizens in the town get a chance to say whether they agree with us or not. So hopefully we can get to the point now with the board to come back very, very soon with some recommendations as to where we could be looking. I know that you probably have started working on some things. We will like to come back soon to give the superintendent and the administration some recommendations as to the areas that we probably want to delve into a little bit more in terms of adjustments, and also those areas we feel that are probably where we probably would not like to see adjustments to the budget. And so, and I think those will form probably some guidelines for how to look at the next iteration of the budget, you know. I don't know if there's any other thoughts.
I want to echo the thanks for all the work. I know I've been on the other side of slicing and dicing, and I know what it's like, so thank you.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all right. Meeting adjourned.